You can just keep the Bible with you because you'll read and I won't.
I'm not sure how much I'm going to read tonight. There's just two of us.
What?
Sometimes different things trigger it, whether your neck is out of alignment. Inflammation can cause it. That's one of my triggers is gluten, dairy, and sugars. If I have too much of those, because they're high inflammatory foods, those will kick it off for me too.
I think it was based on sinus and allergy infections. It was an allergic reaction and an infection at the same time.
Yep.
Because I'm very allergic to stuff in the air.
Yep.
Freeze.
Yep.
And I was outside walking for about a mile.
Yep.
On a windy day.
Yep.
In the springtime.
It'll kick it. It'll kick it up.
I'm surprised it didn't get worse. Hello, welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Well, how are you doing, Ann? Pretty good. Oh, yeah, that's nice. Well worth taking. It is, yeah, but that's okay. I think we're not expecting anybody else.
Actually, brain breathing and it helps to reduce that pressure.
That would be true. It might. Is that the thing where you pour it through your nose? Yeah.
Costco
I'm not
has an
sure.
amazing one. It's a water bottle with a little black top. I take the straw out. And then
And you just pour it
And then I do that in
We
the shower.
have one of those things, yeah. Well,
to clear out your sinuses?
yeah.
Sorry, did they mention
What do you call it, doctor?
Yes, but.
It's a very mature attitude. That's what I say about the pulpit.
It was just chatting.
It's not my spot, it's the church's.
If you're okay if I borrow that.
All right, well, yeah, thanks everybody for being here. Sorry, we're getting off to a slow start. Online, we have the Laties and Kelly. And Kelly just joined us. I'm still getting all the taco stuff out of my teeth, but I think I'm ready to go. So that's very good. Kelly, thank you for those tacos. And last time we left off with the ending statement of Job here. It's 3 chapters long, and we mostly looked at how, well, after looking at wisdom, we talked about days gone by, and maybe we can start with a prayer blessing, and then we'll review there, starting with the review question 3. So let's go. Heavenly Father, thanks for this chance to get together again and keep studying the book of Job. Help us to be moved by his great suffering, to deeper sympathy for those who are suffering, and a stronger faith in you when we go through suffering in our own lives, whether it be through loss or through bodily affliction or a combination of all those things. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. So then I said we'd start by just kind of reading Job chapter 29 together, but anybody remember what stuck out at you? What did Job seem to miss the most about his old life in 29?
Place of honor.
Yeah, the seat of honor. And notice it wasn't just that he was respected, but why did everybody respect Job so much? What was it that he did for the community that everyone seemed to appreciate?
He took care of everybody, the widows,
Yeah.
and
He gave advice.
Mm-hmm.
the best advice.
He was the best advice giver, exactly. He walks, but he gives advice and everybody else just stops talking after that. So I thought I'd just read that, and I'll just read it for fun here and get us back into it. And then we'll look more closely at chapters 30 and 31, but these really all go together and it's good to read it as a unit here. And I'm curious how long this will take. I bet it'll take 3 minutes when I'm watching the clock. So Job chapter 29. Yeah. Job continued his discourse. How I long for the months gone by, for the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone on my head and by his light I walked through darkness. Oh, for the days when I was in my prime, when God's intimate friendship blessed my house, when the Almighty was still with me and my children were around me, when my path was drenched with cream and rocks poured out for me streams of olive oil. When I was in the gate of the city and took my seat in the public square, the young men saw me and stepped aside. The old men rose to their feet. The chief men refrained from speaking and covered their mouths with their hands. The voices of the nobles were hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouths. Whoever heard me spoke well of me, and those who saw me commended me, because I rescued the poor who cried out for help, and the fatherless who had none to assist them. The one who was dying blessed me. I made the widow's heart sing. I put on righteousness as my clothing. Justice was my robe and my turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy. I took up the case of the stranger. I broke the fangs of the wicked and snatched the victims from their teeth. I thought, I will die in my own house. My days are numerous as the grains of the sand. My roots will reach to the water, and the dew will lie all night on my branches. My glory will not fade. The bow will be ever new in my hand. People listened to me expectantly, waiting in silence for my counsel. After I had spoken, they spoke no more. My words fell gently on their ears. They waited for me as for showers, and drank in my words as the spring rain. When I smiled at them, they scarcely believed it. The light of my face was precious to them. I chose the way for them and sat as their chief. I dwelt as a king among his troops. I was like one who comforts mourners. So now we got it back in our head, and let's go on to the next chapter here, where he compares his previous situation to now. Oh, look, that was only 2.5 minutes. So it really doesn't take long to read the Bible if you just read it. Anybody want to read the first 8 verses here, chapter 30, verses 1 through 8? Jenna,
Yes, I can.
thank you.
And now they mock me, men younger than I, fathers I would disdain to put with my sheepdog. Of what use was the strength of their hands to me, since their vigor had gone from them? Haggard from want and hunger, they roamed to a parched land and desolate wasteland at night. In the brush they gathered salt herbs, and their food was the root of the broom bush. They were banished from human society, shouted as if they were thieves. They were forced to live in the dry stream beds among the rocks and the holes of the ground. They brayed among the bushes and huddled in the undergrowth. A base and nameless brood, they were driven out of the land.
Yeah, and so here, what kind of people does Job seem to be describing?
Gangs.
Yeah, kind of like homeless gangs of people. And their homeless, of course, didn't live in the urban areas. They were excluded from the urban areas and lived in the desert, basically, the wilderness. Yeah. Now, are these the same people who were mentioned back in chapter 24? If you remember, there was a group of people described there, starting really in verse 24, verse 5. Like wild donkeys in the desert, the poor go about their labor of foraging for food. The wasteland provides for the food of their children. Seems to be some overlap there. But there he's talking specifically about people who are mistreated and kind of kicked out of the city and have no home because there's no one there that'll accept them. Here in chapter 30, it's more just focused on how totally pathetic their life is. They have almost no food. They're just eating roots that they can dig up in the ground. Seems to be that perhaps there's something these people have done to deserve this, or maybe they're just considered unlucky and mistreated. It's interesting that these people are in here. They kind of serve as a foil. You know that term, just basically a contrast. And they don't have a major part in the book of Job, but as we're talking about these issues of God's justice and fairness and people being mistreated, it does raise the prospect, what about people like this who are just kind of born into these societies that, or maybe outside of society where they really don't have much of a chance. But why does Job bring these people up?
For the big contrast coming up.
Yeah, because what are they doing to him now? Yeah, they're mocking him. So look at chapter 30, verse 1. But now they mock me, men younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to put with my sheepdogs. So the reasons he mentions these people, like the very, very lowest people on the totem pole, is to show that now even they are mocking him. So even these, it would be like today if somebody was trying to describe how far they'd fallen and how bad their life was. And they said, you know, even the homeless people walk by me and spit on me and make fun of me, you know, and it's not to diss homeless people, but it would just like, that's about as low as you can get. You know, I can't really imagine any lower. So yeah, he's really fallen quite far. And that's what he'll say again as we pick it up in verse 9. And now those young men mock me in song. So now we're going to see how these lowest people are treating Job now that he has now that he's fallen. But keep in mind, these are the people that he would have helped before, presumably. These are the poor and the needy. Anybody ready to read verses 9 through 15? Oh yeah, go ahead.
In 24.
Yeah.
He felt sorry for him.
Yeah.
And he felt more compassion.
Yeah.
Here, he's really putting this group down.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I kind of glossed over that, but what is he? There's kind of
So are they really two separate groups, maybe? Because
either they're two separate groups or he's just getting bitter as he thinks about it. I mean, what do you think? There's kind of two ways to explain it.
to me, it seems like there's two separate groups because he tried to help the first group.
Yeah. And whereas this group, it seems like he's just, I mean, the way he talks about them isn't as maybe godly and sympathetic as you'd like him to sound.
Would it just take them as my sheepdogs?
Yeah, he's really looking down on them.
He's really putting this.
A little bit.
So, but I think the reason is because of what we're about to read, because of the way they've been treating him, and he responds in kind. But yeah, there isn't. So I think when he's kind of in 24, he's just thinking in general about the wicked, and he's thinking about them as victims of the wicked, and so he has sympathy for them. But now he doesn't. So we see maybe a little bit of pride. What are you going to say?
There's also, I mean, there's the possibility that we don't know how much time we have passed between 24 and 30.
Yeah, that's true too.
It's possible that, I mean, it's possible this could all be like one long diatribe, or it could have happened over a series of days.
Yeah,
Weeks.
yeah. This could even be kind of a summary of the whole thing that happened.
Kind of the same thing. If they were poor and homeless, and then they were started fighting over the little things that they could get, they could easily turn into gangs over time.
Yeah,
Just with a mob mentality or.
yeah, that's a good point. So, yeah, it's good you point that out. It's an interesting thing that he talks about the same, seems to be a similar group of people anyway, but in different ways. But I think of my own self and how I think of the homeless. And if I'm just thinking of their plot in the abstract and I'm talking to somebody about, you know, how tough their life is and how unfair society is, I might be real sympathetic. And then if I'm downtown and, you know, somebody threatens me or keys my car or, you know, I have to step in their excrement, my attitude's going to be different. So it could be we just caught it with two different attitudes. But a good point. That being said, now we can turn to so all of that really, the function here is to show us how bad it is for Job now that even these people are treating him so badly. So let's look at 9 through 15. Lance has got it.
And now their sons mock me in song. I have become a byword among them. They detest me and keep their distance. They do not hesitate to spit in my face. Now that God has unstrung my bow and afflicted me, they throw off restraint in my presence. On my right, the tribe attacks. They lay snares for my feet. They build their siege rams against me. They break up my road. They succeed in destroying me without anyone's helping them. They advance as though a gaping breach. Amid the ruins, they come rolling in. Terrors overwhelm me. My dignity is driven away as by the wind. My safety vanishes like a cloud.
Yeah. So in what ways does he describe being mistreated here?
Like they're attacking him, physically attacking him.
Yeah. Yeah. And as long as we're on that, does that seem literal or does some of it seem metaphorical? Yeah, maybe some of it is.
They're probably not buildings. actual heat ramps.
Probably not. That seems a little bit much.
It can also be his perception
Hmm.
of the situation.
Yeah,
When you start to feel a threat, you tend to see it more and you see things that they're doing as more threatening.
yeah. So that's kind of how he feels. He feels under siege. I mean, there are some physical things, like they spit at him. I mean, that seems, you can see that quite literally. And I was thinking, once you find out he's lost all his wealth and his children are dead, well, we saw he had at least a couple servants left who brought him the bad news. And he still presumably had a home in the city. Maybe he had some wealth or something. So it is possible that they said, hey, let's break into Job's place and, attack him. So it is possible some of this is actually literal. Although it would still be, it's probably not a literal siege ramp, but just like when there's a natural disaster, what's one of the biggest concerns? Looting. So it's, that could be what's happening. And who's going to be looting? It's probably going to be these destitute people who have nothing, who see an opportunity to get some free stuff and get a little bit ahead.
And even if they're not being beaten or anything, they could be saying like, I'm going to do harm to you, and then
Yeah.
they would not feel safe physically. And
Yeah.
other types of non-physical abuse, with the trauma and how the body works, that you start actually being afraid for your safety physically.
Yeah. So it may or may not be. At the same time, can you see a group of, teenage thugs making fun of an old man and kicking him around or something when they walk by? Certainly could be. So in any case, he's really being treated poorly. And it just shows you how this guy he was there for other people, even people he didn't know, when they needed justice. Not only is he being treated like this by these people, but it doesn't sound like anybody's coming to his aid, including all those people who he'd helped before and who used to respect him. So you can see why it would be such a horrible thing. Are there any other details we didn't point out that just really highlight Job's suffering in that section? Of course, he's being mocked, and a byword, the word a byword, it's not really a word we used, but basically a word that you use to, it means something bad. Kind of like today, the way we use Hitler, and everybody knows what Hitler means, and we almost just throw it around, and or Judas or something, and they're using Job's name that way. Any other thoughts on that section? Or we can keep going. So 16 through 19 now talks about his physical situation in more detail. Thank you, Derek.
I got the EHP.
All right, we'll follow. Whoa, you got a physical copy of that? Okay. I wonder who edited that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll check it later. Because that's the Wells translation. And not a lot of people would want to take on Job.
Is that latest, I'm sorry,
The
latest Wells translation?
Is that the one we?
There's only
looked at
one.
early?
that we
That we looked at earlier?
when we had that translation comparison, yeah, but it's not revised. But we had only the New Testament and certain Old Testament books were out at that time. So now the whole thing.
Okay.
So
So that's a very early time.
within a couple of years, yeah, it's only,
We got it.
yeah,
Cool.
it's a new
Yeah.
thing.
All right. Now my soul is being poured out within me. Days of suffering and season. Night pierces my bone with pain. My bones with pain. The pain gnawing at me never stops. God tugs violently at my clothing. He chokes me like the color of my robe. He has thrown me into the mud, and I have become like dust and ashes.
Pretty similar translation. Hard to evaluate, but yeah. So so how does Job describe his physical condition?
He's in pain.
Yeah. And I don't know, how would you describe the pain to a doctor? If you were-
You
Okay.
The frowny face.
Yeah,
On the 1 to
Sure.
10 scale.
sounds like that. Yeah, it's a gnawing pain that never rests, and it,
Pretty much how Netflix every day,
yeah. You're in a lot of pain?
all
All-
the
yeah.
time.
Well, good for you holding it in. Yeah, that's the worst. My teeny tiny little bits of pain I've had, I could barely take it. So yeah, that's tough. And it sounds like it's a pain that's deep, it's not just like a little soreness. It's like, ugh, within him aching.
So the fact that it says night pierces my bones.
Yeah,
It's one thing to have pain like during the day, but pain that keeps you up at night
yeah.
takes it to another level.
Yep, because then you can't sleep.
I don't have a face on the chart for that one.
Yeah.
They don't. They need to.
No.
They don't have a proper code for it either.
Yeah.
Well, like,
No.
it's illegal. Yeah, well, that's my point.
Ah, okay, I see.
I've known people that say that even.
Which one? I don't know, actually. What?
You're talking about something green.
I know. I'm just referring to, it's probably illegal. It's good enough.
I see what your point is, yeah. In any case, he's in serious pain. And he binds me like the neck of my garment. Yeah, so that's like he's being choked.
Yeah, pain that is so intense that you literally cannot breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, terrible. And I'm reduced to dust and ashes, and that from dust you are, to dust you shall return. And so, and he's about as close to death as you can be, because he's laying there in the dust and ashes, about to die, in pain, wanting to die. So definitely gives you some more sympathy for his situation.
In 16, it sounds like he feels like he's dying.
Yeah, yeah. And that's important, and it's been important too, that from his perspective, he must assume God is about to kill him, because he doesn't have much left. And after everything else he's gone through, he doesn't seem to expect a reversal. He seems to be worried he's going to die and everyone's going to think he was guilty. All right. Anything else there? So it's a pretty bad. And I think as we read through this, we got some hints at how bad it was, but this kind of at the end, he reveals it, and it has a bigger impact. All right. So then 20 through 23. Now he, though, will have a bit of an accusation against the Lord, and we'll see to what degree is this accurate and fair, to what degree is this, crossing the line. So who wants to read these verses?
I can do it.
Thank you. Oh,
Go ahead.
Jake, thank you.
I cry out to you, O God, but you do not answer. I stand up, but you merely look at me. You turn on me ruthlessly. With the might of your hand, you attack me. You snatch me up and drive me before the wind. You toss me about in the storm. I know you will bring me down to death, to the place appointed for all the living.
Yeah, so that's what we just said, right? He was expecting that. What is his accusation against the Lord?
He's doing it.
Yeah. And it would be one thing to sort of have a pious prayer, Lord, this is more than I can handle. How long? But you turn on me ruthlessly. What does that imply?
Just for no particular reason, he's attacking.
Yeah. So rather than kind of this attitude of your ways are beyond understanding, and if I have a cross to bear, I'll bear it. It's you're being mean, like there's something improper in the way God is doing this.
That's the way out when you're just looking at me.
Yeah.
In the way I kind of think about it is like you think of Greek mythology,
Mhm.
God's mythology. You take this,
Yeah.
just, pull up a storm for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Just Hera. Hera is a great example of that, how she was pursuing Odysseus and just couldn't stand him. That's the whole thing behind the Odyssey. And sort of treating him that way. Kelly had a good point earlier today that, maybe part of the reason God did this whole thing was just to reveal something about his character before Christ, that he wasn't like that. Because it did seem like not even his friends, but even Job had some of these false ideas about God. And so he chooses Job as the object of this suffering, but then so that he can reveal something, for all posterity, really, and something that we can't fully understand until we get to Christ and see him, the God incarnate, embracing suffering to the point of death for us. But yeah, anything else? Yeah, you turn, basically, you're not only are you mistreating me or you're treating me harshly, but it's unfair or it's callous or it's cruel, something to that effect. So that is crossing a line. And then Job 30, 24 to 31. And this is just kind of a final crescendo of misery, you could say. You want to do it, Anna? Thanks.
Surely no one lays a hand on a broken man when he cries for help in his distress. Have I not wept for those in trouble? Has not my soul grieved for the poor? Yet when I hoped for good, evil came. When I looked for light, then came darkness. The churning inside me never stops. Days of suffering confront me. I go about blackened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. I have become a brother of jackals, a companion of owls. My skin grows black and peels. My body burns with fever. My heart is tuned to mourning, and my feet to the sound of wailing.
You know, what's interesting, our translation was almost completely identical until the last line, and they've changed harp to lyre and flute to pipe. All the random things. But anyway, yeah, that's to distract with something less important. So he presents himself as a person broken in every way. Which images do you find most striking there?
Skin peeling.
Yeah, blackened skin peeling. I knew a homeless guy like that in Hong Kong. He never wore shoes, and he just lived on the streets. And his feet were just black and the grossest things ever. Actually, it's kind of an interesting story. When like the last day I was there, I saw him, and I felt really bad because I'd never offered him money, and I thought, here I am, a Christian, and I would kind of recognize him. We never really said hello, but I would kind of give a head nod, and he would look at me sort of like he knew who I was. I think he probably had some mental disorder. But the very last time I saw him, I thought, you know what? I'm going to give him some money. I'm going to give him a lot of money because I feel bad for him. So I gave him kind of the equivalent of like $50. I handed it towards him, and he just went, no. And like, he got angry with me. And it was a good reminder that we as foreigners in a foreign country, there's only so much we can do. Because, I didn't know the culture. I don't know why that was offensive to him, but it was. And here it was, like, I was trying to do something nice before I went, and, who knows why, but I ended up just insulting him and probably making him feel bad. So that's why it's important to train local people and have them do the mission work. But anyway, his feet were just jet black. If Kelly's there, she probably remembers the guy that I'm thinking of, because we walk by him a lot on the way between the ALS and the subway. Anyway, yeah, that's pretty gross. That sticks in my mind too. Anything else?
Yeah, what does it mean to be a companion of owls?
Companion of owls. So they are lonely night creatures that hoot, and they're often associated with death and destruction and desolation. When God overthrows a city, one of the things it'll say is he will make it a haunt of jackals and a home of owls. And so it seems to be he's just lonely and in the wild.
Not wisdom like we normally think of an owl.
Yeah, no. Yeah, they did not have that connotation at all.
Okay.
I think they were more like, I think Native Americans often have this idea that owls are kind of creepy, and you don't want to run across one. They would be more along those lines.
In 27, the churning inside of me almost sounds like he's struggling so much that it's literally making him sick to his stomach.
Yeah, literally sick to his stomach.
Anxiety, stress,
Mhm.
everything else is just eating away at him from the stomach out.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. All right, well, so it's a tough section, but if we can, let's get into the next chapter. I think we can for sure get into it. And what he's going to do now is he's showed us how good he had it, how bad it is now, and he's going to say, and I haven't done anything to deserve this. And he's not saying he is without sin, although he comes almost close to it at some points. But from the karma worldview, he's saying, I haven't done anything that should have brought about this amount of suffering. It just doesn't add up. And so he'll start with kind of one of the hardest sins for men, and saying that he's avoided it. So let's look at verses 1 through 4. Anybody? Lance has got it. Okay.
I made a covenant with my eyes, not to look lustfully at a girl. For what is a man's lot from God above? His heritage from the Almighty on high. Is it not ruin for the wicked, disaster for those who do wrong? Does he not see my ways and count my every step?
Yeah. Now here's where a place where the NIV is better in 2011. He says, I did not look lustfully at a young woman, which is a better, in this day and age, maybe that could be misleading. But yeah, so he says he hasn't committed these sins that deserve terrible suffering. Why do you think he begins as he does here with this first one?
That's the most common thing that would.
Yeah.
Befall a man.
Yeah, I mean, not only never been with a prostitute or never had an affair, but never even looked lustfully at a young woman. So he's setting the bar.
With his eyes.
Yeah. That's pretty important. And then with all these, he's going to say what he didn't do, and then why he didn't do it, and often what he would deserve if he had done it. And so here he says, why didn't he look lustfully at anyone? What did he know?
I would know.
Yeah.
He watches him all the time.
Yeah. And if he has this attitude of, I didn't sin because I wanted to avoid trouble. I wanted to avoid suffering. You can,
Even the appearance of impropriety.
yeah, you can see his frustration now that it feels like he's getting what a terrible sinner deserves. So then there's several more sections here, and rather than, I couldn't think of unique questions for each one. So we'll just look at it section by section and say, what is the sin? And why didn't he commit it? And what would he deserve if he did commit it, in his own opinion? So first 5 through 8. We could even just go across here rather than, because there's several sections in a row. Maybe we'll just go Derek over. So Derek. Yeah.
Have I walked with deceitful lies? Has my foot hurried to pursue fraud? If God weighs me on a scale, he will know my integrity. If my footsteps have slipped off the path, if my heart has pursued things desired by my eyes, if anything corrupt is stuck to my palms, then let someone else eat what I have sown. Let my crops be uprooted.
Yeah. So for this section, then, what is the type of sin he's saying he didn't commit? Yeah. And specifically, probably in an economic way, although in generally speaking, lies, but in that culture, false scales, underpaying, overcharging, he never committed those kind of sins. And it's, possible to live and not commit those kind of sins. Why didn't he? There's not a strong statement, but a few brief statements there. What did he know would eventually happen?
God weighed me in on the
Yeah,
scales.
he knew God would one day judge. And so what did he say he deserves if he did this?
Crops being uprooted and others eating what he's sown.
Yeah, exactly. So if he had cheated others, then it would be fair for him to lose all his crops, but it's not what happened. Also, I guess, does it ever say his crops were destroyed? Never does. Come to think, I think it's all cattle and
It is livestock and
Yeah.
family.
yeah. So maybe he did have some crops left, and that's what people came in and stole. But
It just reads somewhere else. Just because something probably is uprooted,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's actually destroyed.
They were
Yeah.
pretty ruthless back then. I mean, they would either pour salt on the land, they would throw rocks on the land, so they were
yeah,
pretty ruthless.
yeah, they would, if you were an enemy, they would make your land totally uninhabitable so that you'd just die of starvation. But if they wanted to take your land, their first choice would be to just slaughter you all and then use it. But, maybe they didn't have enough people to come in and populate. So why let someone else live there and be their enemy again? Yeah, pretty harsh times. All right, so then the next one, 9 through 12, a different sin, similar to the first, but a little different.
If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then may my wife grind another man's grain.
Yeah,
And may other men sleep with her, For that would have been wicked, a sin to be judged. It is a fire that burns to destruction. It would have uprooted my harvest.
Yeah. Here's another one where you get a sense he's perhaps a little callous and not as sensitive as he could be, but you got to think about him laying in the dust and ashes and getting spit on before you're too judgmental. But yeah, what does he say he has not committed here? Adultery. Yeah. Oh, what's that, Jake there?
Adultery.
Yeah. And why didn't he? Oh, we'll go to Jake first.
Well, his wife would have left him basically
Yeah.
to work for another man, or, like they said, grind his grain.
Yeah.
And then sleep around. So
Yeah.
that would be really harsh.
Yeah. So he knew it was a terrible thing. And he says he would deserve to have his wife go to someone else if he would do that with someone else's wife. So that's one of the more, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but notable statements he makes in this section. But his main point is he never did commit adultery, and how many people do, and how many people did back then. So then 13 through 20, wait, no. Yes, 13 through 15. So, yeah.
If I have denied justice to my men servants and maids when they had a grievance against me, what will I do when God confronts me? What will I answer when called to account? Did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one form both of us within our mother?
Yeah. So this one is really remarkable. What's he saying about the way he treated his servants?
Treated them well. I mean, he didn't.
You realize that they too were made
Yeah.
by God.
Yeah. I mean, he looked at them as equals in a certain sense. And he didn't deny them justice. And think how easy that is to do. If you're the rich guy with all the power, and if they come to you with a complaint, how easy it would be to say, go back to the field. I don't care. I don't want to hear it. But he always heard it, and he always did what was appropriate. And it specifically when they had a grievance against me, they felt they weren't paid enough. They were asked to do too much. Somebody stole their cloak and they needed it to be reimbursed, whatever kind of thing it might be. By the way, this section, chapter 31, is sometimes compared to the Sermon on the Mount, and said it's the highest ethical standard ever set forth in the Old Testament. There are passages that say love your neighbor as yourself and love God with all your heart. But as we'll see, we've seen a little bit and a little bit more coming up that, even lusting is just evil in God's eyes. Thinking of yourself as better than others is evil in God's eyes. And Job had a very developed sense of morality, especially we think of living back in those times.
He had to for being most righteous.
Yeah.
guy alive.
Yeah, exactly. He's really kind of showing us here, even though you can sense a bit of ego coming through, that this is why he was the most righteous guy. He was very conscientious. 16 through 23 then.
I have denied the desires of the poor, or let the eyes of the widow grow weary. If I have kept my bread to myself, not sharing it with the fatherless, but from my youth I reared him as would a father, and from my birth I guided the widow. If I have seen anyone perishing for lack of clothing, or a needy man without a garment, and his heart did not bless me, for warming him with the fleece for my sheep, and if I have raised my hand against the fatherless, knowing that I had influence in court, then let my arm fall from the shoulder, let it be broken off of the joint. For I dreaded destruction from God, and for fear of his pleasure, I could not do such things.
Yeah. So what kind of, sins did he avoid and righteous things did he do?
That's hungry.
Yeah.
Here's the widows.
Yeah.
First,
The orphan and the widows and the poor. Yeah, that I noticed you laughing at that line. Yeah.
well,
And there are some little traces of things he says in here that make you think, is he perhaps getting a little bit full of himself? and exaggerating a little bit his own righteousness. Yeah. From birth, he's guided the widow. I mean, that would have been quite a feat. So obviously, at least there's exaggeration, but still, and this is not his own servants. This is just anyone. He says anyone he sees lacking clothing, he would give them some fleece so they could be warm. And if he ever raised his hand, then may his arm be broken off. Very fitting kind of oath there that he's taking. And why? Why was he so careful to be good to all, especially the poor?
Fear the destruction of God.
Yeah, that God would. He knew that God cares for the poor and the widow, and that is
Because they have the power to do these things.
yeah, and he knew that God had put him in that position to be able to do it, and God had the power to judge him if he didn't use his wealth appropriately. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this section? Gave them food, gave them clothing, gave them guidance and help. He reared the youth as a father, so father figure. So it's kind of interesting now that saying this, just the disdainful way he was speaking about the poor earlier, it's an interesting contrast, but I don't know exactly what to make of it. So then the next two really they're part of the reason this is compared to the Sermon on the Mount. It's very subtle sins here he is talking about. So verses 24 to 28. Yeah, can you read with your migraine and everything? Okay.
I got it. If I have put my trust in gold, or said to pure gold, you are my security. If I have rejoiced over my great wealth, the fortune my hands have gained. If I have regarded the sun as radiance, moving in splendor, so that my heart was secretly enticed, and offered them then these also would be sins to be judged, for I would have been unfaithful to God on high.
Yeah, so what's he denying here?
Yes, and God is an idol.
Yeah.
Something he's putting before God,
Mhm.
that he's trusting in.
Yep. Yeah, and the impressive thing about it is that he understands an idol is not just, a statue or something you consider a false god, but the first one he mentions is gold. And so trusting in his wealth, he realizes that would be idolatry. And that's something we say a lot, but in the Old Testament, usually when they're talking about idolatry, it's, they had enough trouble with literal idolatry. It's like they were kind of at the kindergarten level. They didn't need to go to these more sophisticated understanding of it. So yeah, he didn't do that. And the sun and the moon were often idols. And he says he didn't secretly worship them or anything else that would have been worshiped. By the way, I think it was the city of Haran where Abraham stopped on his way from Ur. It was kind of halfway. He stopped there with his father, Terah, and his brother Nahor, and another brother died there. Anyway, in that city, that was a center of moon worship. My only point. So they did worship the sun and the moon a lot in the ancient time. We kind of forget that they didn't only worship animals and humans.
I was an adult before I realized that when God said, "Let there be light," it wasn't the sun.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
He made the sun days later, so
Mhm.
that people would think of the sun as most important for a god.
Sure, yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of natural to worship the sun if you're going to just if you're totally ignorant and you're looking for things to worship. I mean, it's pretty obvious that a lot of good stuff comes from there, but still would be idolatry. Yeah, so he didn't commit any such idolatry. Feel free to get some water too if you need it. All right, then the last section, there's two more, and we're actually skipping 3 verses for the end. Verses 29 through 34. Jake, would you want to read those?
Okay. If I have rejoiced at my enemy's misfortune or gloated over the trouble that came to him, I have not allowed my mouth to sin by invoking a curse against his life. If the men of my household had never said, who has not had his fill of Job's meat? But no stranger had to spend the night in the street, for my door was always open to the traveler. If I have concealed my sin as men do by hiding my guilt in my heart because I so feared the crowd and so dreaded the contempt of the clans that I kept silent and would not go outside.
Yeah, and we'll stop there.
Okay,
So in this section, this is one that often gets compared to the Sermon on the Mount. Can you see why? There's a couple things. He criticizes that we don't see criticized a whole lot until Jesus, between here and there. One issue where Jews will criticize Christians is in Jesus' command to love your enemy. Because, you know, there is in the Old Testament, there's plenty of prayers for destruction of enemies, and how to harmonize that is basically your first prayer is they repent, but if they're not going to repent, you do pray God would stop them in their wickedness. But notice he says he never rejoiced at an enemy's downfall, and he never gloated over an enemy. So that's a very high bar, you know. Again, it comes up in the Sermon on the Mount. He never said, then in 31, it's kind of saying, there's all my servants were saying, oh, he gives us so much food to eat, you know, basically, he's a very good employer. But then 32, he took care of even strangers and helped people who were traveling. And 33, he said he never hid his sin in his heart. So whatever sin he had, he was very open. He was never hypocritical or tried to hide who he was. And that, you know, Jesus talks a lot about the hypocrites there. And 34, fearing the crowd. You know, sometimes we know the right thing to do, but the fear of crowd and peer pressure makes us not do it. And he's saying, no, I did the right thing, and think how hard that is. Here, he doesn't say why or what the punishment would have been. And you kind of get the sense he's not breaking down exactly, but he's a little less coherent. He's kind of jumping from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And before we look at 35 to 37, we're going to do 38 to 40. It ends kind of in it's weird that it doesn't end with verse 37. 38, 39, and 40 are kind of an anticlimax. But could you read that there, Derek?
38.
Yeah.
If my soul cries out against thee, and its spirit furs weep because of thee, if I have consumed its wealth without paying for it, if I have caused the death of its owners, then let a thorn bush grow up instead of stinkweeds instead of barley.
Yeah.
The words of Job.
Yeah, so he's been a very good caretaker of his land and his farmers, basically. So that's interesting. But then really the highlight here is 35 through 37. And this, we'll read it and talk about it. It's quite, even after everything we've seen, and as sympathetic as we should be towards Job, probably something about this won't quite sit right with you. So let's read 35 to 37.
Oh, that I have someone to hear me. I sign now my defense. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser put his indictment in writing. Surely I would wear it on my shoulder. I would put it on like a crown. I would give him an account of my every step. I would present it to him as to a ruler.
Yeah. And by the way, in the Hebrew, it could be, instead of as to a ruler, it could be I would present it to him as a ruler. And I think the previous has something like I would approach him as a prince, or is that what yours has? Yeah. And I think that's actually a better translation. So here I disagree. What does the EHV have?
That I would approach him like the chief of the tribe.
Okay, yeah, that works too. That would, I prefer that as opposed to the new NIV. But anyway, what he wishes someone would hear him. He thinks no one will hear him. Ironic. God is soon to appear. But what does he want from God?
In court.
He wants his
Yeah.
indictment in writing already.
Yeah, he wants court, but he actually wants a piece of paper. He says, God, why don't you just write out what exactly your problem is with me? And what would he do with that thing? He'd wear it. Now, he says wear it on my shoulder. Probably it's not right here, but it's probably like where on a jersey you have the back, you know, really your shoulder blades right there. Or like a crown. Yeah. So I'd be proud to show everybody what God has against me And am I afraid of what he thinks? No. What would he do? I'd given him account of my every step. So that,
I don't wanna do that.
yeah, I'd present it to him. What's that? Yeah, that there's a lot of steps in there. And he could be forgetting perhaps some missteps. So even though he's been mostly righteous and God will commend him, God will still humble him before he commends him. And that it's worth noting. So he ends, it's kind of a high point and a low point in a sense. You can understand how he's been driven this far, but this is not the attitude we want to have before the Almighty, ever. And he's fortunate that God is as kind and forgiving as he is, that he does have sympathy for Job and he does let this go. I will point out, let's see, just to get ahead a little bit, we'll talk about it more later, but skip to chapter 40 and we'll just look at how God's going to end up answering him. Because we have Elihu in the middle here, and it'll be a few weeks before we read this, but so basically Job has just said, bring it on, God. I want a day in court. I want to talk to you. I want you to tell me. I'm going to answer back to you. Now compare chapter 40, and I'll just read 40 verse 1. The Lord said to Job, and this is in the middle. This is halfway through the Lord's speech. Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. Then Job answered the Lord. This is Job's first answer. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. And this is, I think, the center part of his answer, by the way. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you and you will answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me? Justify yourself. Do you have an arm like God's? And can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. Unleash the fury of your wrath. Look at all who are proud and bring them low. Look at all who are proud and humble them. Crush the wicked where they stand, bury them together in the dust, shroud their faces in the grave. Then I will myself admit to you that your own right hand can save you. So it's pretty, that's where he gets direct. And then if you'll just skip to verse 42, verse 1, then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now and I will speak. I will question you and you shall answer. My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. So a little preview and to understand how God will bring him around to the right way of thinking again. So, but it'll be still worth taking some time to go through Elihu's responses. That's what we'll do next time. I haven't decided if I'll do that in one session or two. A lot of what Elihu says is just talking, but it's filler. I don't know. Maybe that's a good way to put it, with a little bit of nuggets in there. And I think that's not criticizing the Holy Spirit. That's just how Elihu was and how he's portrayed. He's a young guy. Yeah, he's the young guy. So he's got some insight, but he's also got a lot of hot air. And he hasn't yet learned the difference between the two. And then the Lord's response, and it starts out with nature, but then it ends with that more pointed address to Job. So, all right. Well, that's our lesson. So thank you for joining, and God bless. Any final thoughts or questions as we finish up? So we'll probably finish Job, but definitely before summer, probably mid-May sometime, and then we'll probably just be done through the summer and then rethink what we're going to do for Bible study in the fall. Hopefully have Sunday Bible study going again, and think about what you would like for a midweek. In the past, we didn't really have a Wednesday night Bible study. Not a bad thing to have. We have had a Thursday morning Bible study in the past. That may start up again. Morning? That's fine. No, it's hard for a lot of people, but it's great for retirees.
There's a big crowd.
It was a very big crowd. I may start that class with Job, because other than you guys, nobody in that class is here, except the ladies are here sometimes. So
wanna do it here at 9:45 when I have the kindergartners.
Yeah, that could be an issue, so. All right, well, anyway, blessings and thank you. We'll end the Bible study there, so. Thank you, ladies. Good to see you.
Thank you, you too.